Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. We have finally finished our live stream playthrough of Avowed, and that means I can start doing builds for the game. Of course, we've already reviewed Ranger mechanics, and that's how I played the entire game, so I figured that would be the best build to start with. And what better character to go through first than Richard Harrow, one of my all-time favorite characters in a TV series ever. He's a Boardwalk Empire, formerly a military vet. He experienced a grievous wound to his face that basically blew half of it off, to the point that he now wears a mask in order to cover up those wounds, but the mask is equally disturbing. So every time people see his face, they are terrified of him and they treat him like a freak. Personally, I think that's a fantastic way to play through Avowed, and so I'm basing this character around him. So first and foremost, let's go through the attribute points. Obviously, you want to deal a ton of damage, so we want to get might as high as possible. 15 is the max that an attribute stat can get to. We go ahead and do that. Next up is Constitution. You really don't need high Constitution unless you're going to do a melee type build. That's not what we're doing here. We're going to be focusing on Arquebuses. So I actually left Constitution at 0, but it had a 2-point increase from one of the quests that I did. Next up is Dexterity. Once again, we left this at 0 because this is not a build about throwing out as many shots as possible. It's about making every shot count, which is what a sniper rifle is all about at the end of the day, right? So don't need high dexterity. We leave this at 0. We just happen to have a +2 bonus. Next up is Perception. Perception is going to determine your critical hit chance and maximum range. The maximum range portion is absolutely crucial. It's really important that you can hit from far out so you can get that true sniper feel. So you want to get this as high as possible. The critical hit chance doesn't matter as much because, as you'll see later, you can slow down time while you're doing pyro attacks, which ensures you'll always hit enemies in their faces or wherever their soft bits are. We don't care about essence or elemental resistance for this build, so we can leave intelligence at 0. And while we do use stamina quite a bit, stamina management for a gunner is not particularly difficult. It's melee characters, especially ones who are using two-handed weapons, who really need to manage stamina. Now, next up, let's talk about the abilities that you should be taking. You have to go ahead and take Tanglefoot in order to open up the rest of the Ranger's list. Now, this is going to allow you to immobilize one enemy. The really cool thing about this ability is that it comes out immediately. So unlike Marius's version, which has a delay before he actually immobilizes the enemy, you can do this very quickly if a foe is running towards you. So it's basically like a get out of jail free card. Not bad to have. Next up is Steady Aim. This is going to slow down time by up to 75% when you use a power attack with your gun. Absolutely amazing, not only to ensure that you're getting critical hits, but also to ensure that your companion abilities are targeting the right enemies. So it just allows you to slow the field down and do exactly what you want. Next up is Marksmanship, which is going to increase the damage your guns do by up to 50%. No brainer, you want this. I've spec'd out of Scavenger, but for most of your adventure, you're going to need to have this on. The second rank allows you to purchase upgrade materials for 25% less. Upgrading your guns and armor is extremely necessary, and it can be very expensive. So having this really is a must for just about any class that you run. Definitely make sure that you pick it up. Next up is Bear Ally, and this is going to throw out a bear companion who, when you get rank 2, will automatically taunt all the nearby enemies, and it'll increase the damage the bear deals. And by rank 3, you can keep the bear out for 45 seconds when the cooldown is only 25 seconds. So this is a great way to throw out another character. If you find yourself getting interrupted and just overrun over and over again, you can use this as a way to taunt and get some of the heat off of you if you're not running with Kai, or if for whatever reason Kai is not able to hold the aggro. Next up is Critical Strike, which increases your critical hit chance by up to 20%. Again, you should be able to get critical hits very consistently regardless, but there's no reason to pass up this opportunity to help ensure that you're getting critical hits all the time. After that, we get Sniper. Now, this is going to increase your damage against unaware opponents by up to 40%. You can very, very consistently get off shots against opponents before they realize you are there. And so this is damage you should be triggering pretty much constantly. Go ahead and make sure you max it out. And then finally, we got Staggering Shot, which will increase the stun attack damage that your guns deal by 90%. This is actually a big deal, especially for this kind of build, because arquebuses already deal fantastic stun damage, and it's great to stun enemies because they'll drop to one knee and allow you to do a special attack that deals massive damage to them. So you want to stun your enemies as often as possible. Maxing this out will help you do just that. Now, you are going to have some leftover points, especially if you go ahead and get to level 30, which I did during my playthrough. And so I picked out some additional things from Fighter. I decided to do a playthrough where we completely ignored magic, because I had heard multiple times that, hey, magic is great, but from a martial standpoint, this game isn't that good. And I wanted to see that for myself, but I actually really enjoyed sticking with the martial abilities. So in Fighter, I maxed out toughness. That's going to increase your health, obviously make you more tanky. And I put some points in constant recovery, which is going to allow you to automatically regenerate some of the damage you recently experienced. And again, it's going to make you more tanky and harder for enemies to take down. And then finally, I went on and picked up Inspiring Triumph, which is going to trigger every time you kill an enemy and restore some of your companions' max health. And if you get rank 2, it'll even revive them, which is something I really like for Richard Harrow, because most of Jimmy's other guys, they weren't real bruisers. They weren't guys who you could really depend on, right? It was really Harrow taking these guys along and saying, no, we're going to make this happen. And then through pure force and terror, making people respect Jimmy. So I like this. I think it really works well. And as you can already see from the footage, this build works very well and allows you to absolutely decimate enemies. Now, let me mention a few other things that I think are really going to help you to make this build shine. First and foremost, I do recommend you go ahead and use Kai, because he's going to help taunt enemies and keep the heat off of you so that your foes are not interrupting your shots. Because if you take too much damage, it'll cause you to not be able to focus on your power attack. Obviously, you don't want that. So I recommend you pick up Fire and Ire, which is going to be fantastic to keep bosses focused on him. And then I also recommend you get Second Wind to help ensure that Kai is able to stay on his feet. And then if you have some points left over for a third skill, Leap of Daring is going to allow you to stun multiple enemies at one time. And so it's going to do even more to keep the battlefield focused on Kai so that you can just light them up from afar. I would also say Giada's really useful for this build as well, because she's going to give you a significant bonus to attack speed, which is an area you're going to be low in due to having almost no dexterity. And so this is going to make your rotation of attacks a little bit faster. Remember, attack speed is not going to increase reload speed. So you'll attack really fast, but your reload speed will still be the same. So it's not going to be a crazy increase to your duration, but it's something. And so it's definitely worth considering. All right, now let's go ahead and look at the gear. My weapon is Heaven Strike, which has the enchantment Andra's Anger, allowing power attacks to deal high frost accumulation to nearby enemies. Keep in mind that this is an upgraded version of the enchantment, so it's not the enchantment you're first going to see when you get this weapon. But in addition to that, its hits deal an additional 10% bonus frost damage. So this is all about lighting up enemies with frost damage and potentially freezing them even if they survive the strikes. Really powerful from both a damage and a crowd control perspective. I love this weapon. And because it's hitting multiple enemies at one time, the fact that you're not pumping out a ton of shots doesn't matter, because with one shot, it can damn near wipe out groups. So all the way around, this is just great stuff. Now for armor, I'm using Gambison of the Grand Empire, which gives me a 3% increase in damage reduction, but even more importantly, it gives me a 15% increase to reload speed. So it's going to help make up for that low dexterity score. Great stuff. Next up is the clothing, and I personally prefer the Trickster's Glove, which is going to give me an additional 25% critical damage. Again, the vast majority of your hits should be critical hits, so this is going to be a massive boost to your damage with an Arquebus, which already does more damage than most other weapons. Now, alternatively, you could use the Wavebinder braces, which are going to give you a 15% increase to reload speed, and they're going to reduce your ability essence cost by 10%. You have low essence, so this is going to help you use abilities more often. And obviously, reload speed is going to make your shots come out quicker. But again, I feel like with a sniper type build, focus on making every shot count. Don't focus on trying to pump out 10, 15, 20 shots. That shouldn't be required. A few shots should be all it takes to wipe out most of your competition. Now, to make my outfit look a little bit more consistent, I actually took the Valiant gauntlets and I used the transmog on them so that they would match with the Valiant armor that I'm using, just as a FYI. And then for the boots, I didn't really find good boots, so I'm just using the Sojourner boots. These provide a boost of 40 to my maximum stamina, so I have a lot more stamina to play around with, and obviously that helps to make up for the very, very low resolve score, and it increases my health restoration from all sources. And once again, I picked up the Valiant boots and I'm using the transmog on them so that the entire outfit looks consistent, even though it's a hodgepodge of different equipment that I actually have on this character. And then finally, for the accessories for the pendant, I have just a +2 perception, and that makes it easier for us to reach those 15 level caps. You could alternatively use the badge, which is going to give you +2 might, depending on which stats you find to be important. I also have the Ring of Pain amplification, which is going to give me an additional 15% increase to critical damage. So my crit hits are going to just slap enemies like a truck. And then finally, Ring of the Founder allows me to do an additional 10% damage against enemies with full health. So obviously that's not all that great against bosses, and long encounters, but the vast majority of the time you're going to be dealing with regular enemies or elites, and the shot that you do first is really, really going to matter. And so with this, it just helps to ensure that my first shot absolutely lays them down, and I appreciate that. And that's it. That is the full Richard Harrow Arquebus sniper build. I had a great time putting this together. It's very similar to the dual pistol build that I did for most of the game. The only difference is I focused more on dexterity in that. So instead of maxing out 2 stats, I evenly distributed my stats across might, dexterity, and perception. And I focused more on reload speed in my gear. And that allowed me to just pump out more shots with my pistols and allowed me to trigger their effects more often. So you can decide that type of build might even satisfy your playstyle more for this. But for me, I really like just slow and steady she goes. But when that shot comes out, absolutely devastating large amounts of enemies. To be honest with you, there's a part of me that thinks this might be better than the build that I used for the playthrough, only because with the pistols, I, for the most part, was only attacking enemies one at a time. And the whole time I was thinking, if I could just lay down a fireball or a freezing pillar, I could probably wipe out some of these groups of enemies faster. And so using this gives me that same effect, still without using magic. But on my next playthrough, I'm definitely going to go all in on magic because casting from those grimoires looks amazing, and I will definitely do a magic build somewhere down the line. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed this build. Definitely let me know your feedback down in the comments. I'm looking forward to it, and I'll see you on the next video. Take care.